Alrighty, and welcome back to the second part of this series for the API Security CTF 2025 walkthrough. If you haven't already watched part 1, I strongly recommend you watch it because you will be lost if you don't. So make sure to go back, rewatch it, then come back over here, and let's get started with challenge number 4. So in challenge number 4, it's asking us to create a token for the administrative role. This is the most challenging out of all the challenges because of how complex you can get when it comes to JWT tokens. So I'm going to walk through a few steps that I did to try out, and then we'll walk through the correct path. We need to somehow gain administrative access, and the first thing you want to do when it says something like that is look at the JWT. So we're going to go back over to our registration page, and we're going to get the token. And we're going to grab the token that we previously generated. And we can go to something called jwt.io. And this website is perfect when it comes to wanting to tamper with JWT tokens. So let's paste it in and we can see what data is being stored. So you see the API version as v2. That indicates that we can only access v2 endpoints. You got the user ID, name, email, role, as well as expiration. The first thing that I always try to do whenever there's a challenge like this or in the real world is just simply modify the role and see if it's being signed properly. And as you can see, because I tampered with it, it now says signature is invalid. So we can't really be tampering with this. So let's paste it back in and let's see what else we could do. Maybe we can remove the algorithm, right? And let's put it to none, but still same thing. Now there's also another application that you can try out called token.dev, and we could always paste in this JWT in as well, and we could do the exact same thing. So we can go here and type in none. We can see that it says JWT string is verified, and we try to go back to the challenge, and instead of the authorized being our valid, we're going to go here, paste it in, and we're just going to go to the user info section. And it says here that we failed to parse JWT. That's okay. Let's go back over here and let's see if we can tamper with it just a little bit more before we move on to the next section. So we have an API version, which is kind of interesting. We're going to set this algorithm back to the original, which was HS256. And we're going to change the API version to, let's say, V1. Let's see if this works, because each version comes with maybe a V1, V2, something along those lines. Developers do enjoy doing that. So we're going to go back over here, and we're going to go back to the authorize section. And we're going to paste this in, click on authorize, and let's see if maybe this works. Let's find out. And it doesn't look like it works. So we can't tamper with the JWT. We can try to take this JWT, throw it into Hashcat using the module 16500, but it doesn't work. So after you exhaust all these kind of options, I started to give up on the CTF. I know a few other people also started to give up, and we all started getting stuck. So the solution is actually quite simple. So if we go back to the API, remember how I told you in the first part to take a look at the XAPI version? Yeah, we're back on that. As we could see inside of the documentation, it was kind of odd to us that we saw support being there twice, right? They're the exact same thing. There's support requests, and then there's legacy. And when we go to support and we try it out, which I'm going to actually need to create a valid token because I have messed up my original token. But once we authorize, we can go down here and we could see legacy. We could also see support and all the different kinds of things. But if we try it out with this V2 token, remember how we got this error message, and it was a bit weird that we got this? Because it says users should be using API version 2, which we are. The allowed API version is version 2, which we are, but the requested API version is legacy. Considering that it's legacy, we could try to put V1 as the API version, because that is a legacy version after all, right? So let's execute this on the token endpoint, and we see here that there's no such thing as V1. No, it's not a real thing. So that can't work, but let's just try to put in legacy and let's see what happens. So that also doesn't work. So what could possibly be going on? Well, if you read carefully the error message, you could see here that it says user is not permitted to use this API version. And right here it says our role is set to user. meaning that we need to somehow change our role from user to something else, whether it be admin, volunteer, whatever it could be, we need to change it. So we can't use anything with this endpoint for now, but if you remember, we also had an interesting group of requests, such as users. And here we can update the user values. So let's go over here. We're going to need our user information, and let's paste it in to this user ID, and let's also set the role to volunteer. Execute it, and it still does not work. User is not permitted to use this API version. Well, this is getting frustrating now, right? Because we can't do anything, we can't modify or update our user, which is really annoying. When we try to fetch any other users to maybe see what other roles there could be, we still don't have permission. So, starting to lose hope. But there's still one more user endpoint that we could play with, and that's the delete user role. So let's delete it, and we can see here that our role got deleted. Well, considering that we're not the user role anymore, I wonder if there's some form of authorization error on the back end where it'll still allow me to authorize even though I'm no longer a user. I'm nothing now, right? My user is technically deleted through the API. So let's go back to the legacy and let's see if maybe now, because I changed my role, maybe now it worked. And still nothing. But it does say that my role was deleted, which is a good start. So let's go back over here. Let's go to token and let's keep it to legacy and let's just execute. We can see here now we have a new JWT token. But what exactly is this JWT token doing? Well, let's go back to the JWT debugger and let's see that the API version is now set to legacy. So far what we have is we can now access legacy endpoints which we could potentially abuse. Now that we have the authorization bearer token in place, let's try to use the support feature. And it doesn't look like we have permission to use that. All right, let's try maybe the summary of request. Let's see if this maybe works. And it looks like it does. There's just a bunch of different things. We could see that there's a resolve true, messages 6, and there's also an admin here. So that's pretty interesting. I wonder what this is all about. So we can try to use a different endpoint and see if maybe we can gather the request ID for that admin, but it doesn't look like when we do it, it's actually going to work. That's not going to work. To save us trouble, we're not going to start going through each one, but this endpoint doesn't work because it's set to resolved, and when it's set to resolved, we just can't see it. Let's actually make a request so we can see what's going on. So let's create a new request. So we're going to need a title. Let's call it Emory Security. We're going to need a message, please subscribe, and we're going to need a group ID. Now, we can get our group ID from the user info. So let's go back to user info and let's click on execute. And let's grab our group ID here. Alrighty. And let's go back down and let's put it in to this parameter. So we can see that our ID is 146 and the title is Emory Security. So let's go over to the delete function. Let's type in 146. When we click on execute, we can see that we get an error message saying that the support request is read only. However, if you continue to scroll down a little bit, you can still see the chat logs of this particular support request. So here it says, please subscribe. Well, that's quite interesting, right? So let's click on one, let's submit it, and let's see what we get. It looks like there is a API rate limiting mechanism from two people communicating, too many request errors. So this is not it, but let's create a quick script that goes through each of the support requests and identifies the one that we're looking for. So we're going to execute with base URL. We have headers here with the authorization bearer token. And again, this token is the legacy token. We're going to iterate over 100 different kinds of support requests. Using the delete method, we're going to check for the status code of 405 from the response. And if the response text has admin in it, that means we're good to go and we found it. So let's run this and let's see what we get. And it looks like we get a bunch of information. Now I can't really read this. So what we're going to do quickly is we're going to just take this information. We're going to put it into support.json. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a JQ on this. So we're going to cat it out .json and we're just going to do a JQ. And what this is going to do again is it's going to beautify it for us. And we could see that there's a bunch of different chat logs related to the administrator page. Looks like the request ID is 9. And they start to talk a little bit about something interesting. They're looking at a brand new endpoint. We haven't seen this endpoint before. So let's copy this, and we're going to have to make a curl request, but let's continue reading on a little bit. And it looks like, I got the token. So this is where we get our token, is from here. But I also need the private event code. So it looks like they're trying to set up a group event through this chat feature, but they can't seem to locate it. So we'll need to find it. That's fine. So let's do one step at a time. So let's go on curl. Let's do X, and let's post, because I would assume that it's a post request. And we're going to submit our authorization bearer token, which is a legacy token, to the endpoint. And when we do that, we see that we get the access token. And this is our fourth flag. This was definitely one of the hardest challenges in this competition, but it definitely gives us some great and valuable resources to really learn and understand. So if it was a JWT attack, you'd probably find it using the algorithm none. You'd probably find it by modifying stuff. If there's a weak signature, you can crack it. But it was none of that. It was simply doing additional enumeration on the application, figuring out what each endpoint does, and then eventually obtaining the administrator token. So this is the next challenge key. So we're going to keep that in mind. Let's go back to the next challenge. The next challenge says, now we want to use that token to uncover the original activity invitation code. Well, considering that we've already seen some of the chat logs about them planning a new location and a new event at a different place, we probably want to go to this endpoint. But we do need a group ID, because if this is groups, it's safe to assume that this is a group ID. If you remember, in a previous challenge, we already got a group ID. So let's get this group ID, and we're going to want to do a curl request, and using the get method, we're going to want to go to the URL that we specify, meltechsolutions.com, and we're going to want to take that endpoint, modify this with our group ID that we have right here, and now we're going to want to do an H. We're going to want to accept application JSON, and we're also going to want to set the header to authorization bearer, and we're going to want to get token. Oh, and it says it is not found. That is all right, and it looks like I do have a typo inside of my URL. So let's quickly modify this. So let's just take this quickly, and we'll put it into something called chat JSON. We'll paste that in, and then we'll do a cat for JQ. So there's just a bunch of chat logs here, and if we read through a little bit, private council communications, so the council discussion. This is the group ID that we previously got, with the owner being our user that we specified. And when we scroll down a little bit, we can see that we get the flag for the fifth challenge. Let's go to the next challenge, which is locate the perfect ambush site that meets our strategic requirements. When you discover this location UUID, share it without delay. So considering that it says something about a location ID, it's safe to assume we're going to have to go back to that location endpoint. So let's go to our file here, which has everything, and we're going to want to start looking for something that has to do with a brand new location coming from our user. So let's paste it in. Looks like we have 7, and that doesn't seem like anything. It looks like he's talking about temperatures there, which is not really what we're looking for. We're looking for something having to do with events, relocation, something along those lines, and this also does not seem accurate. Oh, what's this? The historical significance of the artifacts. We will certainly hosting more events here. So if he's going to host more events here, it's safe to assume that this is the location ID that we're looking for, which it is. So we're going to take this, and we're going to now put it here. The final challenge says, create the ultimate request that will lead and redirect the meeting and set our trap for the Moonstone Exchange. So let's go back over here to our application. Let's close all this stuff out. The one endpoint that we really want to look at, which is the one request endpoint. So it's looking for specific things. The first is the group ID. So let's go back here. Let's grab the group ID, activity ID, location ID, which is what we just got. Invite code we know is one request, and then melon. Last but not least, we're going to want that user ID that we had at the first challenge. Something very important to remember is you're going to also want to set your authorization token in the authorize section here, so that way you can authenticate to this endpoint. So let's go back over here. Let's do a curl request, and let's go to that post. Let's grab a brand new token because they do expire after a certain amount of time. So let's copy this. Let's paste it into this authorize. Let's go over here, click execute, true, 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 and here's the last flag that we are looking for. This was overall a fantastic challenge. Huge shout out to Meltech Solutions for putting on a fantastic CTF. They do a great job. Last year they did a fantastic job. This year is even better. Thank you to APISec for making the CTF possible. If you do enjoy this content, please like, subscribe, and share it. So thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.